The EU finance ministers have wrapped up their emergency meeting in Brussels on Greece's debt crisis. After the meeting, the Eurogroup president said that the proposals offered by Athens on Monday could lead to a deal with Greece in a likely meeting later this week.
New proposals from the Greek government came in this morning, which we welcomed today, which is seen as a positive step in the process. But given the very little time that the institutions have had to look at the proposals, they were unable to give us a full and in-depth assessment of the proposals. And all of this with a view of, if possible, reaching an agreement later this week and using the Greek proposals as a basis for that.
Dijsselbloem said work on the Greek proposals will begin immediately. He added the EU institutions and Greek officials will go through the proposals in detail to see whether they add up in fiscal terms. His comments followed mixed reactions to the proposals among EU leaders. The French president said that Greece must remain in the Eurozone and called for lasting accord. But the German and Finnish finance ministers expressed pessimism, with Wolfgang Schäuble saying that Greece's reforms plans contain little new. A possible deal later this week could unlock much-needed bailout funds for Greece and head off risks of a Greek exit from the European Union. The European Union's president says the reform proposals offered by Greece to its creditors on Monday are the first real step forward by Athens in weeks.
The latest Greek proposals are the first real proposals in many weeks. But the most important thing is that the leaders take full responsibility for the political process to avoid the worst-case scenario, which means uncontrollable, chaotic Brexit.
Donald Tusk said the proposals still need the assessment of the creditors. Tusk was speaking after the head of the Eurogroup described the proposal as an opportunity for a deal later this week. Earlier, Tusk held bilateral talks with Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras on the issue. It came as thousands of people gathered outside the Greek parliament to back Greece's membership in the European Union and the Eurozone. The demonstrators also voiced support for the government's anti-austerity agenda. Stocks have rallied in the European Union, the United States and Asia in hopes that a 5-month standoff between Greece and its creditors is finally coming to an end. Stocks closed around 3% higher in Frankfurt, Paris and Madrid. In Athens, the prospects of a debt deal shot up the main index by over 8%. The news also helped boost London's benchmark by over 1%. The positive trend was also seen in Asian markets in Tokyo, Seoul and Hong Kong. Meanwhile, the U.S. stocks opened higher on Monday, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite rallying 0.7%.
Eurozone finance ministers have ended an emergency meeting on Greece's debt crisis with no breakthrough in Brussels. In a press conference after the meeting, Eurogroup President Jeroen Dijsselbloem, however, described Greece's new reform proposals as a welcome step and an opportunity for a debt relief deal this week.
New proposals from the Greek government came in this morning, which we welcomed today, which is seen as a positive step in the process. But given the very little time that the institutions have had to look at the proposals, they were unable to give us a full and in-depth assessment.
He added that authorities will immediately start work on the proposals presented by Athens. Dijsselbloem's upbeat remarks came after some EU officials, including the German finance minister, expressed pessimism about a possible deal before the meeting began.
We have so far not received any substantial proposals, and I do not see how, without substantial proposals, we are supposed to be in a position in the Eurogroup to do what we have to do.
Greece's new package of proposals, including value-added tax rates, early retirement measures and tax increases, aim to prevent Greece from defaulting on a €1.6 billion IMF loan repayment. The Greek Prime Minister, however, insists that Athens is strongly opposed to pension cuts, higher power rates and excessive budget surpluses in a possible deal with creditors. Greece has until June 30 to make the payment, or it would fall out of the euro currency or even the EU. Some analysts believe Greece's exit could ultimately cost Europe its single currency. Over the past few months, Greek officials have been holding talks on economic reforms deemed as necessary by international creditors before Athens can get funds worth 7.2 billion euros. The installment, which has been delayed since February, is the final batch of the country's 240 billion euro bailout. The cash-strapped Greek government has been under public pressure at home to fulfill its anti-austerity promises made during the previous election campaign. Greeks have been bearing the brunt of the financial crisis. They have been holding anti-austerity demonstrations saying they refuse to pay for the wrong policies implemented by the EU, which focus on belt-tightening measures rather than encouraging growth or job creation. The clock is now ticking down to a deadline for the two sides to reach a deal to avert a debt default that could have disastrous consequences. Greece and the European Union will be under increasing pressure to resolve their differences because so much is at stake for both sides and beyond.
If you're confused, don't be. Konstantin Venizelos is a correspondent joining us from Greece's capital, Athens. Konstantin Venizelos, really, it's so confusing. Not only for me, for everybody. Disselblom just saying that, you know, there's hope. Then you have Wolfgang Schäuble saying, well, at one point I think he said that maybe a Grexit is what's best. And of course, you know what Angela Merkel thinks. So what do you think?
Good evening, Carver. Let's take the outcome of this afternoon, extremely brief Eurogroup meeting with a pinch of salt, because we've been at this point of buoyance before and we didn't get very far in the negotiations, if not in our analysis. Now, of course, let's look at what Greece is actually proposing here and why, for example, tomorrow evening, tens of thousands of pensioners from all over Greece will be protesting against this first indication of a potential agreement. Greece, Carver, is proposing to eliminate early retirement options starting from January the 1st, 2016. It's proposing imposing a levy on companies with more than €500,000 euros in annual profits, and of course a levy on individuals earning more than 30,000 euros per year. The last two, of course, you can imagine, are a nod, but only a nod, Carver, to leftist notions of redistribution of wealth. On a political level, therefore, going into an agreement, if we have an agreement later on in the week, Syriza will remain under the fiscal supervision of the Troika institutions and will not be able to fully unfold its anti-austerity agenda. Earlier on in the afternoon, George Stathakis, the economy minister, not to be confused with the finance minister, Mr. Varoufakis, of course, said that Greece is now rescued. Well, let's not go that far, because for starters, we expect a formal communique to reach the Greek government later tonight, formalizing, officializing, if you like, the beginning of technical talks on this potential deal. And of course, just now, as we speak, EU leaders are arriving for an emergency political summit on Greece. So, you know, Syriza prematurely perhaps is celebrating some kind of a breakthrough which has not been achieved yet. A Eurogroup meeting will be taking place later on in the week. But I think we have here to separate once and for all the technocratic side of these negotiations with the political side of it. And we explained why. And additionally, we should remind the viewers that if Syriza goes into any potential agreement this week, it will be hard to sell this in Parliament. Criticism is already emerging from the Syriza hardliners about last night's Greek proposal, which was received late, say the EU officials today. But in any case, according to Jeroen Dijsselbloem, there is some optimism at play. But according to others, like, for example, Clemens Fust, who is the head of a German, very powerful German financial think tank, he says, quote, Alexis Tsipras has no plan for economic recovery in Greece. His only plan, he says, is to employ more government officials to nationalize companies and to make the citizens of other countries fund his policy. This comes from a German industrialist and financier. So we shouldn't jump into any early conclusions. Certainly, this could well fall apart later in the week. We have some early indications of a potential agreement, but we should consider, above all, Carver, how this agreement might hinder rolling back on austerity in Greece as to the length that Syriza envisages, and of course what this means for changing mainstream economic policy, like also Syriza visualizes. None of these two projects in Syriza's universe of fiscal adjustments seem to agree with this outcome.
Thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. Constantine Venezuela, it's good to talk to you as usual.